Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership at TEPSA. And each episode, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and invite them on to share a piece of their story in hopes that it inspires you to share some of yours. I'm thrilled for today's guest, Genein Letford. Thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you for having me. I am Genein Letford. I was an elementary school teacher for about 15 years, and I just left the classroom to speak and write and teach and educate more on financial literacy compared with creative literacy. So that is now my passion, and that's what I'm doing now.
I love that. So, I always like to start way at the beginning, Janine. And so, when you were a kid growing up, dreaming what you were going to be when you got older, was educator one of those dreams?
Yes, and I remember one of the first lessons that I did when I was in church. It was like I was trying to teach a story of Moses, and I found a song that kind of taught this concept, and that's my first experience of bringing in music to teach concepts. So I was raised, all my siblings had experience with music, the arts, and so that was just a big part of our life. And now I find myself infusing it
Yeah.
to my life's mission now of teaching creative literacy, but also teaching just creative thinking, but using the arts to help people think more creatively.
I love that. So when you were going to school to be a teacher, were you naturally drawn to one grade level or another? Like I know some people are like, "Oh, I was totally elementary the whole time," or "I was totally in love with secondary."
Well, I knew I wanted the small ones, but my degree was in psychology, and I knew the foundational years between 0 and 10 or 0 and 12 are just critical years. So I knew I wanted to focus on there. And there was something about the third grade. Like they're still small enough where they give you hugs and they love you, but they're big enough where they can think abstractly and they
Yeah.
can laugh at your higher level advanced jokes. So I thought that was my sweet spot. So I taught 3 years of third grade, and then the principal actually gave me an opportunity to teach a music program for the whole school. And that's where the integrations of the arts and academics started there.
I love that. Okay, so you move into this opportunity to do the music program, which kind of brings in your love from when you were a kid and what all your family was raised with. And so, what was your favorite part of leading that?
Well, every teacher loves the moment, right? And especially you really get that a lot in elementary school because a lot of things are new to them. But for music, a lot of it was just level playing field. Like I didn't really have any Mozarts coming through. Where in general ed, sometimes you have those like advanced gifted kids, but I believe everyone has gifts. They're just in different areas. But in music, mostly everyone is starting out like putting a flute in a fourth grader's hand. I mean, cross hot cross buns, right? But then to see them, I started a nonprofit called Alumni 360 where I give kids creative literacy, financial literacy, and scholarship support. And now I see some of my students who I met at 6 years old. They're like 22, going off doing jazz festivals, winning awards, and I was like, wow, I was the one who put a flute in your hand in the third grade, and look at you now. So you really get to see that progression, which is fun.
Well, I love you just, you can see just in your eyes how you light up when you talk about the music and the arts and things like that. And so, you mentioned starting a nonprofit. And so, when did that become something that laid heavy on your heart that you're like, this is something that I want to do to take this a little bit further?
Well, I did the whole university thing and I was financially illiterate. My mom did a great job raising us, but we didn't know too much about money, and which is a lot
Right.
of people's situation. And I ended up $100,000 in debt. Didn't even really know how credit cards even
Yeah.
work. And here I am with a UCLA degree and not knowing basic financial principles. So I was still teaching elementary school, and I would just look at my students, and I'm just like, wow, no one's really giving them the red flag here. No one's really warning them, like, beware of just, I'm not against student loans, but I'm like, just go in knowing what they're about and
Yeah.
knowing how they factor in with time and interest and money, time and money and value. And a lot of kids, especially the kids that I work with, my demographic is predominantly low wealth,
Mhm.
first gen, that demographic. So I literally saw like a vision of them on a conveyor belt into this pit of debt.
Yeah.
And that was my ought. I say everyone has their ought, like you ought to do something, and that
Uh-huh.
thing that keeps coming up. So that was my ought. And I just got a bunch of kids together, a lot of them graduates of my elementary school. I said, I don't know why we're here, but I feel the need, I feel the push to just give you guys some heads up. This is my story. We were still working through the debt. And in 2015, we were, or 2017, 2015, we paid off the last debt, which was great. But they got to see me
Wow.
finish that journey. And then I ended up writing a book about it called From Debt to Destiny, Creating Financial Freedom from the Inside Out. And in the book, I connect the creative literacy to the financial literacy. So my ability to think creatively, to look at new ways to bring value, to tell my story, to just look at new ways to bring income into the household to pay off this debt faster. I
Yeah.
started to teach the kids that your ability to think creatively affects your financial health. So your creative health affects your financial wealth
Yeah.
is my tagline.
Well, there's several things in there that I want to ask about, but there was one thing that you said at the beginning that really stood out to me. I can tell by the way you talk, you're very careful with your words, and you've thought through them, and you understand the power that our words put out there. And something you said when you were describing your students was you said low wealth. And I loved that perspective of where your kids were instead of children from poverty or anything like that. Why do you feel that it's so important, not only for educators, but us just as adults, to be careful about the way we stigmatize people by using certain language?
Well, that's a great catch, and I can tell you're an educator because we catch these things. And number one, words are very powerful. And the noun, what that adjective that's in front of the noun is very critical. So even when I used to say, oh, homeless people, now I say people who are experiencing homelessness because you want it to be just a small time in their life, not a total identity forming position.
Yeah.
So actually, there's a man named Travion Shorters. He's the CEO of Be Me Community. He has a concept called asset framing. And he says a
Mhm.
lot of times we frame our students or frame certain demographics with their liabilities, and we don't talk about their assets, but their liabilities are in front of them. So you talk about at risk youth,
Yeah.
delinquent youth, low income youth. So these kids are hearing these terms in front of their noun for their
Mhm.
entire
Yeah.
formation years. Remember, those 0 to 12 years are critical years of their identity forming years. And what does that do to their subconscious of who they
Mhm.
are, who they believe they can be? Oh, I'm a low income, at risk, delinquent youth who you need to save, as opposed to a dynamic, promising potential student who happens to
Yeah.
come from a low wealth area. But so I'm not ignoring these stats.
Yeah.
I just want to put their assets in front and let them know that the sky is not even the limit. They can go beyond the sky. And looking at their liabilities, but
Right.
their liabilities you can overcome. And as a great man, I think it was Booker T. Washington said, sometimes your greatness comes from what you overcame.
Mhm.
So it's just reframing with their assets in front.
Well, I love what you said there about the subliminal messaging that we send, and I don't think any of us educators do it on purpose or do it to harm any children, but we have to be careful of our words. I remember so clearly when I was a new teacher, I attended some kind of PD, and they talked about how what you say to children, they have a visualization of it. And so, and a very simplistic example was they were always said, you should say, you know what, don't ever tell a kid, don't lean back in your chair, because then all they're picturing is leaning back in their chair. So you're not actually helping them stop that behavior because there is no visual picture for don't. And so he said, instead, say something like, make sure all 4 feet of that chair are on the ground, because they can visualize that. And I say that and tying it into what you said of, the words we're saying, our kids are visualizing themselves and internalizing that. And so it's such an easy thing for us to change. It's no risk. It's just takes us being conscious of the words we're using to describe our kids. And it's kind of why I wanted to ask that, because as soon as you said it, because I'm always thinking of my own language and how I can make sure that I'm not having implicit bias, or that I'm not, saying things that come off a totally different way because of my own upbringing. And as soon as you said that, I caught on. And I was like, I love that. I love just that little shift in the
Mhm.
way you say something. And so Shifting gears again, I'm so intrigued by this nonprofit and this passion to really help kids understand their income, understand their wealth, understand, get staying out of debt and ways they can do that. And so now that you've been in that world for a little bit and helping different kids, what are you seeing as one of the really glaring areas that is a deficit in a lot of our kids these days?
Well, the kids and our system. I love academics, and I know we're doing the best we can. But when you
Yeah.
think about finances and wealth, there's no other area in my mind that a concept doesn't touch every single area of your life. If your
Yep.
finances are negatively affected, it affects your education, your ability to have resources, your health, your family. The number one reason of divorce is a financial reason. So the fact that this area touches every part of our life, and we have no mandatory basic exposure to it, it really hurts our students from the demographics that I just described, because a lot of them aren't getting this information from their parents, and so
Yeah.
it's a generational ignorance, basically. And if you're looking to really fight poverty, as the quote says, how can you eradicate poverty without even speaking about money at all? And
Yeah.
another thing is my degrees in psychology. So I really look at the psychological relationship people have with money. So however you grew up with it in the home, you're transferring that to your own home. So once again, we have to be that marker, that trajectory shift. And so one part of the program is a seed for change. And so we have an older person who's been investing, who understands money, and they seed a small amount of money, like $100 to a younger person now in my group. But you can do it in anyone in your life, and you just say, I believe learning about money is so important, and I believe starting your investments, because we also don't understand how time and interest works with
Right.
investments, and how time is the most powerful factor. So if that's the case, why aren't our kids starting their investment life
Mhm.
journey at an earlier age? And so this older person seeds a small amount of money to this person, to this younger person, says, I want you to get started ahead of time. And and it's your risk. The person can take the money and go to the mall, but there's already been the training there. And now I have several young people who are investors, going back to the mindset. Not only am I a consumer, because that's what we're trained to be with
Right.
advertisements and just, but now I'm an investor. I own part of this company or my portfolio. And now they're awake when they see the news. They understand what's the Dow Jones. Now these aren't, it's a whole other language, it's a whole
Yeah.
other world for some folks. So now they're starting to pique their interest, and they're starting to have conversations. And that's really where you want to be. Them just starting to have conversations.
Well, I love that idea of the seed money because and it, like you said, just it's not a lot, but it's something to get started. And sometimes for our kids, they just need something to get started and don't even know where to begin. And to have an adult who can just say, you know what, this is $100, but this will get you started. And so that way they can do that. And this is such an interesting thing to me because, just like you mentioned, I don't think we talk about this enough. And and I live in Texas, and our state implemented financial literacy standards a few years ago into the education of every single grade level. But I think, this is one of those really underrepresented areas in our education because I can think of many of my friends, and myself included, who there are still so many elements of investing and investments that I have no idea what it's talking about. And I had a great education as a kid, but
Hmm.
these things would really benefit me now to know about. And so the more we can prepare kids, that's one huge way we can start battling that generational poverty and that thing like that. Because when you don't know how to get out of something, no amount of hard work is going to help you out when you don't know how to spend the money and you don't know how to invest the money and you don't know how to save the money. It's like all that hard work that you're doing to just try to survive gets you nowhere.
Yeah, we've mixed up hard work, because hard work is important, but if those other elements aren't in place, yeah, you're just running in place, and you want the next generation to be go further than yours.
Well, Janine, I want to switch gears here just a little bit because, you have had a successful career, you've gotten accolades, you've done some great work. But what I find through many of these tell your story conversations is that regardless of how much success we find or how much accolades or how great we're doing at something, we all still at some level battle doubt and that imposter syndrome and that, am I the right person to be doing this? And so what do you personally do to keep doubt at bay so that it doesn't take root and keep you from achieving what you know you're capable of?
Well, this is gonna definitely come out when I write my autobiography because it's been a crazy journey. One, like I said before, I started as an elementary school teacher, and I've been at the same school my entire career. And I don't know if you know, but I'm also on the board of DonorsChoose.org. They're the
I didn't
national
know that.
non-profit. So this isn't just any board. This is like, the CEO of LinkedIn, the senior vice president of Facebook, one of the top female investors in the nation, Stephen Colbert. I mean, this is a heavy hitting team.
Yeah.
And then here I come on, like I teach 5-year-olds how to play the flute, and the recorder, yay. And so it was really a mind shift first
Mhm.
because yeah, talk about imposter syndrome. I was like, do I even belong in a chair? But it really changed my perspective on value. And surprisingly, they never had a teacher on the board, but they're a nonprofit that serves predominantly teachers. So
Right.
they were just really excited to have my point of view. But I had to come in knowing that I deserve a seat at the table. So really, and we not don't shoes is a $1 million, multi-million-dollar not nonprofit, and here I coming with a budget of $1,000 a year, right? So, so here now I'm approving multi-million
Right.
dollar decisions in like a week. So it was a quick shift. They say if you're going to become a millionaire, you need to become a millionaire mentally as well, or you'll quickly
Ah,
lose it. So, but I share that with my students. So I was very vulnerable and open with my students, so they can see my journey as well. And
yeah.
I also have a speech impediment, so I stuttered. I had speech therapy throughout my whole life, and I still stutter as an adult, and had to go through training and join Toastmasters just to practice. As you can see, I'm a lot better now, but it what helps me the most is number one, being driven by my ought, right? I need to be here
Yeah.
because I need to focus on the need. So I focus on my students, or I focus on the board and the need for them to see what a teacher goes through, or just the plight within the classroom that a lot of them don't get to see. And another one is knowing that people have worked hard for me to go through doors that were closed for other people. So I think
Mm,
about my grandmothers. I think Maya Angelou has a wonderful quote of, when I go in the room, I bring 1,000, 10,000 people with me. My grandmothers, my mother, my ancestors, other people who I don't know who worked their gave their whole life just so I can
mhm.
be and show up, in
Yeah.
places that now I'm allowed to show up in. And so
Right.
um but yeah, as you know, you've probably heard this a million times, but it starts in the mind that I'm worthy. I'm worthy of the seat. I have great creative ideas to offer. And if you don't, in my new training program, I have this diamond of design, and I talk about compassion, but I talk about internal compassion as well. We need to have external compassion and do things for other people, but first you need to know how to love yourself. And part of that is knowing that your ideas have value and that your voice should be heard. And so once I really downloaded that concept, um, it really opened me up to showing up in a more confident, fuller way.
You are speaking my language, Janine. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, these are kind of things that I try to expose onto others, but just hearing you say it, I'm like, oh, I feel like you're just pouring into me too. And I could listen to you all day long. You have so many brilliant ideas, and I love just listening to what you share. But, a question that I always love to end all of these conversations on is, I feel like as people, there are things we hold really close to our hearts, our beliefs, who we are. And so, for anybody listening or watching today, if there was one thing you wanted them to take away, what would your one thing be?
I must say it has to go back to the creative health. Your creative health, like your financial health, affects so many areas of your life. Your ability to know that you can produce great ideas,
Right.
but those great ideas aren't for you, they're for us. So we need your ideas. We need you to step up courageously and to give us your best. So, as whatever journey you're going through, we are so excited for you to give us your best creative work.
I love that. Well, Janine, I am so grateful that you have found your voice and that you are out there sharing it, because you have inspired me for a while now. And when you agreed to come on today, I was so stinking excited. So thank you so much for joining me for Tell Your Story.
Thank you for having me. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get it, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Genein has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.